Members' statements has concluded. Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Today the Senate censured the Minister for Aged Care with the support of every crossbencher. Prime Minister, we've heard horror stories of neglect in aged care, including a resident with ants crawling in her open wounds and shocking accounts of sexual assaults, untreated infections and maggots in wounds. With the death of almost 500 aged care residents, why is the Prime Minister arrogantly persisting with an aged care minister who clearly should be sacked from his job?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The many serious issues that require addressing in aged care, and particularly the unacceptable circumstances that occurred in a number of facilities, was the very reason why the Aged Care Royal Commission was called in the first place. It is the very reason why the government, in particular at the strong urging and recommendation of the Minister for Aged Care, has continued to increase funding for aged care by over $1 billion, Mr Speaker, every year. It is the reason why the Minister for Aged Care came to the Cabinet and said we needed to do more in aged care in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and did so, Mr Speaker, in response to the plan that was first launched back in March, Mr Speaker, and flagged in the COVID pandemic plan, Mr Speaker. And that has now led to $1.5 billion being brought and resources to bear in response to the COVID pandemic. And it is why, Mr Speaker, as a result of that effort, including the establishment of the Victorian Aged Care Response Centre, it is a result of those coordinated efforts both by the federal government and the state and territory governments, Mr Speaker, that while there have been terrible impacts in aged care as a result of the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic all around the world, but particularly in Victoria most recently, Mr Speaker, this is something that Australians understand. Australians understand, Mr Speaker, that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on Australia, and that no part of our community and that no part of the facilities that Australians move in and out of on a daily basis are unaffected. And of course it's had an impact on aged care. But what I can say, Mr Speaker, is as a result of the government's efforts, despite the fact that there have been some terrible outcomes, Mr Speaker, in a number of centres, and for that, Mr Speaker, our condolences are expressed to those, Mr Speaker, who are involved with family members and residents. The truth is that some 8% of facilities in total in Australia, Mr Speaker, 8% in total have been affected by COVID infections, both by staff, Mr Speaker, and by residents themselves, and that compares to 56% in the United Kingdom. Mr Speaker, the actions that have been put in place by the government has ensured that we have been able to mitigate what has been a terrible blow as a result of COVID-19 across this country, including in the aged care sector. And despite the fact that there have been a number of cases, Mr Speaker, in facilities, Mr Speaker, the rest of the aged care sector has benefited from the measures that have been put in place. In relation to censures in the Senate, Mr Speaker, that is not a new thing. That is not a new thing, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, John Howard was censured by the Senate. Paul Keating was censured by the Senate, Mr Speaker. Gareth Evans was censured by the Senate, Mr Speaker. Graham Richardson was censured by the Senate. My good friend Graham, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there have been George Brandis.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. The Prime Minister's time has concluded, and I want the interjections can conclude as well. And I'll call the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister outline to the House how, in the midst of the global pandemic and COVID-19 recession, the Morrison government is acting to restore our economy, guarantee the essential services Australians rely on, and keep Australians safe?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Boothby for her question. She, as I'm sure all members of this chamber know, that these are incredibly challenging times for all Australians, right across our country, wherever you live in our nation. The global pandemic, the COVID-19 global recession, for which Australia is not immune, as we learned yesterday with the release of the national accounts. It's placing a significant call and strain on Australians all across our country. It is placing a strain on our nation's governments. It's putting a strain on all of these things, Mr Speaker, and it's been putting a great strain, of course, on the resources of governments, including the federal government. Mr Speaker, our response, though, is not to surrender to this. It's not to surrender what are the most important things to Australians, and it is not to surrender the important responsibilities of our government in protecting those things that matter so much to Australians. Mr Speaker, our response as a government has been to act, to take action to secure Australia's future in the midst of the biggest crisis this country has seen since the Second World War. And that response, Mr Speaker, has been immediately to seek to cushion that blow and to ensure that we stay on top of the virus, Mr Speaker, to enable Australians to be able to move through this terrible crisis, to restore our economy, to ensure that an additional 700,000 Australians did not end up as unemployed, Mr Speaker, as a result of the early action taken and unprecedented action taken by our government. But not just, Mr Speaker, the economic response for now, but into the future, with investment in training and investment in infrastructure, and investment in the ease of doing business so businesses can employ Australians and invest more, the investments in research and technology, Mr Speaker, the investments that are necessary to build Australia's capacity to the future as we recover. But it has also been to deliver on our guarantee for the essential services that Australians rely on. The record funding that we have committed for schools, for hospitals, Mr Speaker, for disability care, for aged care, Mr Speaker, all of these will be delivered despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the COVID-19 recession. And I want to assure Australians that despite the uncertainty and anxiety of these times, this government will deliver on those essential services that you will rely on, particularly during this pandemic period. And we will honour our commitment, Mr Speaker, to keep Australians safe. Safe from all those who would seek to do us harm, Mr Speaker, whether within our borders or without. Whether it's those who would seek to take advantage of the most vulnerable in our community, whether it's children on the internet, Mr Speaker, or those who would seek to do us harm from further afield. Our government's commitment is to ensure that we keep Australians safe here, at home, behind our borders and beyond.
Has concluded. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Australia is in the worst recession in almost a century. Does the Prime Minister take any responsibility for making the recession deeper and longer than it needs to be by cutting JobKeeper, cutting JobSeeker and cutting wages at the worst possible time?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, these are the most challenging times we've seen since the Second World War. The COVID-19 recession we are now in the midst of, Mr Speaker, is a result of the COVID-19 global pandemic. This seems to be a fact that escapes the attention of the Leader of the Labor Party in this country, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Labor Party seems to think that what is occurring in our country now is the result of some sort of political action on behalf of the government, Mr Speaker. And that defies credibility. It defies the credibility of the Labor Party, Mr Speaker, to seem to be the only people in this country today who do not understand that there is a global pandemic with COVID-19. It also defies credibility, Mr Speaker, that the actions of the government, which has seen, Mr Speaker, a commitment not just for today but into the future of more than $300 billion in economic supports, over 15% of our economy, Mr Speaker, means that not only did we see yesterday, Mr Speaker, not only did we see yesterday that despite the terrible news of the impact on our economy, of a 7% fall in the March quarter and just over 6% fall through the year, that in other places, Mr Speaker, that also confront this pandemic, whether it be in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, and the list goes on across the OECD, Sweden, all of them, Mr Speaker, all for far more damagingly hit in their economy. But the other factor is, Mr Speaker, that in this country not only have we sought successfully to cushion what is a terrible blow, more so than other countries, but equally through our coordinated management and fighting of this virus, our death rate as a result of that terrible virus is lower than all of those countries. So, Mr Speaker, whether it is on controlling the virus and suppressing it in this country as best as we can, or cushioning the blow for Australians going through this crisis. Australians know that this government has showed up for them, Mr Speaker, and we will continue to show up for them. And we will continue to guarantee the essential services they rely on, Mr Speaker. We will continue to ensure that we protect their safety, which is the first duty of a federal government, Mr Speaker. We will continue to do all of these things as we make our way through this crisis, which the Leader of the Labor Party seems to be oblivious to.
Just before I call the next question, I've already spoken about the high level of interjections at the end of the first answer. There's repeated interjections from people who've been warned for interjecting all week. And given it's the last question time for a while, I'm not going to detain the House with lengthy explanations. If you have been asked not to interject or been warned for interjecting, I've pulled you up for interjecting, consider yourself warned, and the next interjection will result in an ejection. I call the member for Cowper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development. Will the Deputy Prime Minister outline to the House the Morrison-McCormack government's continued commitment to supporting regional Australia through the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the member for Cowper for his question. Mr Speaker, his Mid-North Coast electorate is helping the nation recover from COVID-19. Of course, we're still in very much the midst of this global pandemic, and the COVID-19 recession is hurting our nation. It's hurting regional Australia, but regional Australia is not only poised to help the relief and recovery efforts, it's already doing the work, the hard work. And country people, they are resilient people. No more resilient than those on the Mid-North Coast in the member for Cowper's electorate, Mr Speaker. And certainly when it comes to agriculture, as we heard from the Minister for Agriculture yesterday, well, even despite the drought, despite the bushfires and despite COVID-19, it grew from a $60 billion enterprise to $61 billion. And we heard from the Minister for Resources in Northern Australia and Water yesterday talking about how in the June quarter the resources and mining sector grew by 0.2%. That is significant. That shows that regional Australia is helping the nation through this crisis. And regional Australia will always do that because regional Australians are resilient. They are courageous and they know how to make a quid, and they know how to do that for and on behalf of this nation, Mr Speaker. Now, the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure program, that's an investment that the federal government has made directly to local government to help them beat COVID-19, to help them put jobs back into their local economies. And in the member for Cowper's electorate, Mr Speaker, there's 5 councils, and they are sharing in the $5.7 million. Belgian, $594,000. Coffs Harbour, $1.3 million. Kempsey, $1.1 million. Nambucca, $768,000. And Port Macquarie Hastings, $1.8 million. And I put that to good use. As part of the 1,000 projects already agreed upon and already approved, we're going to see in coming weeks high-vis workers, excavators pushing dirt around, and that means local jobs in the Mid-North Coast. That means local procurement for those brave, hard-working small businesses, which honestly haven't seen in that area too many COVID-19 cases, and yet they've been hit hard by the COVID-19 crisis. We are ensuring across the nation the delivery of $100 billion of infrastructure over the next decade. Regional Australia is enjoying the benefits of that. 85,000 jobs across the nation. The Pacific Highway, Woolgoolga to Ballina section, will be completed in coming weeks. That's going to save time. That's going to save travel time for people. It's also going to save lives. I know how hard the member for Cowper has fought for the Pacific Highway, and we will certainly look forward to that.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. The member for Rankin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Thousands of businesses are only surviving because of JobKeeper. Why is the Prime Minister cutting support to struggling businesses all over Australia this month?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The reality is JobKeeper is a remarkable program. They're not my words, they're the words of the Governor of the Reserve Bank. Today it's supporting more than 3.5
Member
million
for Burt.
Australian workers and around 1 million Australian businesses. And it was established based on being a temporary program, a targeted program, a scalable program, and one that could flex depending on the demand. And it's the expectation from Treasury.
The Treasurer, just pause. I hope the member for Rankin heard what I said before. Just to make it clear, he has been warned about interjecting more than anyone else in this chamber. The Treasurer has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, I haven't had a question from the member for Rankin since June.
Just
Mr
answer
Speaker,
the question.
and the reality is, Mr Speaker, the reality is he's not interested in
There's an answered one for 12 months.
this issue. Now, Mr Speaker, we have 3.5 million Australians who are receiving JobKeeper. The program has been costed at $101 billion, and the program is tapering over time, Mr Speaker. Now, even the member for Rankin himself has said we should be looking at a kind of tapering. The member for Grainler interjects. Now, Mr Speaker, this is what the member for Grainler said on the Today Show about the JobKeeper. There will need to be some form of tapering off. Karl Stefanovic asked the question of the member for Grainler. What does that look like, Mr Speaker? Well, it will look like it's going down over a period of time. Now, Mr Speaker, that is the reality of what is occurring with the expansion and the extension of JobKeeper. Originally legislated for 6 months, it's now going for an additional 6 months, and at $1,500 currently, it goes to $1,200 in the December quarter, Mr Speaker, and it goes down to $1,000 in the March quarter. Now, Mr Speaker, the reality is this program is supporting millions of Australian workers right around the country. It's a remarkable program. It continues to do a remarkable job, and it helps to keep Australians in work.
Just before I call the member for Indi, I just say to those members who are remoting in today for question time, I see none on the government side, I see them on the opposition side. Obviously, interjections remotely are equally disorderly, and of course it's hard to identify who they are, although one member looks particularly guilty. I just will say the standing orders apply, and not only that, I mean, if it persists, not only will I enforce the standing orders, but you might find yourself disconnected. I call the member for Indi.
My question is to the Treasurer. Yesterday's national accounts are seismic. This is the deepest economic downturn since 1945. In the first half of 2020, Indi lost 1.6 million local tourism visitors. That's 95% of business as usual. Visitor expenditure fell by around $640 million, and over 6,000 jobs were disrupted or lost. Other than JobKeeper, what is the Treasurer doing to strengthen and invest in regional tourism infrastructure, accommodation and hospitality?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Indi for a question and acknowledge that across her electorate, and indeed across Australia, it is a really difficult time for regional tourism businesses. The fact that they've been hit by drought, the fact that they've been hit by fire, the fact that they've been hit by flood, and now they've been hit by a global pandemic. And I know in the members' electorate there's some terrific ski fields, and those businesses have lost a full ski season as a result of the COVID pandemic, and many jobs have been lost in the honourable member's electorate. Now, the member did mention JobKeeper, and there are 4,700 businesses in her electorate who are receiving it. But in addition to JobKeeper, of course, there's the cash flow support that we've been providing, the cash flow boost, as well as other support for apprentices, and that is supporting it's supporting small businesses right across the electorate. And we've heard from Margie Osmond, the CEO of Tourism and the Transport Forum, that the government has heard the voice of the tourism industry loud and clear. But as the honourable member knows, that we've also put in place a $1 billion COVID relief and recovery fund, which is supporting regional communities and industries, and particularly those in the tourism sector. There's been the regional airlines funding assistance of $100 million, which has been underwriting air service providers to ensure connectivity for regional and remote communities. There's been the Regional Air Network Assistance at $198 million, Mr Speaker. There's been crisis relief for regional arts at $10 million. There's been support for Indigenous visual arts centres, Mr Speaker. There's been a temporary waiver of the environmental management charge for the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, Mr Speaker. There's been support for national parks, support for tourism with $12 million worth of fee waivers. There's been support for agricultural sows with a commitment of $36 million. There's been a host of measures, Mr Speaker, that the Morrison-McCormack government has undertaken to support regional tourism.
The member for Wentworth.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline to the House how yesterday's national accounts figures show the resilience of the Australian economy during this global COVID-19 recession?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Wentworth for his question and acknowledge his experience as a distinguished diplomat for Australia abroad before coming to this place, Mr Speaker, as our ambassador to Israel. Now, Mr Speaker, the national accounts numbers yesterday revealed the real devastation that COVID-19 is having on the Australian economy. At a 7% fall for the June quarter, that is the single largest fall that Australia has ever recorded. Now, the single biggest contributor to that fall in GDP over the June quarter was the fall in consumption. We saw a reduction in consumption on transport services of 80%. We saw a reduction in consumption at hotels, at cafes and restaurants of 60%. The reason behind this fall was the health restrictions that were put in place as a result of COVID-19. The Australian way of life was effectively put on hold through that June quarter. Mr Speaker, this is the impact of a once-in-a-century pandemic on our national economy, Mr Speaker. Now, in response to COVID-19, we've put in place a comprehensive range of measures, some $314 billion of support, from the JobKeeper program to the cash flow boost to $750 payments to millions of Australians who are on income support, to the $550 coronavirus supplement, to billions of dollars of incentives to business to invest in plant and machinery and other equipment, Mr Speaker, to help them be more productive as a business and indeed to help us be more productive as a nation. Now, the fact that we went into this crisis from a position of economic strength gave us the financial firepower to respond. But the impact of our $314 billion worth of measures have also seen 700,000 jobs being saved, Mr Speaker. That is the advice of Treasury, that the unemployment rate would be 5 percentage points higher today but for the economic support that we have provided as a country. And also the fact that as a result of this economic support, the severity of the fall in GDP that we saw yesterday was not as great as we've seen in other countries. But the road ahead will be hard, the road ahead will be long, but there is hope for the future. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the Morrison government is absolutely committed to getting Australians back to work.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Australians are going through the toughest period of their working lives. 1 million are unemployed, another 400,000 will join them before Christmas, and thousands of businesses are on the verge of collapse. Why is the Prime Minister cutting JobKeeper, cutting JobSeeker and cutting wages at the very time that Australia has plunged into the worst recession in almost a century?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, the government has committed and already, Mr Speaker, provided unprecedented record support to ensure that we keep as many Australians in jobs as possible, we keep as many businesses open as possible, that we ensure that as we go through this terrible crisis we are training more Australians, particularly in the skills areas, with the Job Trainer program, a $1 billion partnership with the states and territories pulled together in a matter of weeks that will see 340,000 additional training places available, not just to young Australians, but Australians who have found themselves working in some sectors which they know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, will be under great strain for some period. And that's why those who are working in the aviation industry as flight attendants, Mr Speaker, are now training to be aged care workers as we speak. As we speak, Mr Speaker, people are changing sectors, changing industries, getting trained, adjusting for the COVID-19 pandemic so they, Mr Speaker, can get the best support of all, and that is the support that comes directly from their own efforts and their own initiative and their own enterprise. And that is what our plan is based on, Mr Speaker. Our plan for the economy, which we're putting in place, whether it's in ensuring our workplaces are cooperative and flexible, or if it's ensuring that the infrastructure program, Mr Speaker, enables $10 billion to be brought forward, that the affordable, reliable energy that our manufacturing industries need, Mr Speaker, can get that access, as we've seen wholesale prices on gas and other things fall, Mr Speaker. All of these plans are based on the enterprise and the efforts and the initiative of Australians. And those Australians are looking forward to an economy where it doesn't require JobKeeper and other income supports to sustain our economy, Mr Speaker. And that's why JobKeeper, Mr Speaker, will be necessary now, but in the future it is not our plan for it to be required. And that is why the Leader of the Opposition and the Shadow Treasurer and others made the point that it's important that our economy transitions away from JobKeeper and the higher levels of welfare support that have been necessary, but we must be sure that the supports we put in place to get Australians through don't become a barrier to them, Mr Speaker, and don't become a barrier to those businesses to be able to attract employees, whether it's in regional areas or other parts of the country or metropolitan areas. We will continue to provide those supports and are extending for a further 6 months of JobKeeper, ensuring that the job seeker payment with the COVID supplement is at record levels, Mr Speaker, as it continues to be out through the end of this month, and then it will go through the next phase, and then there'll be further phases, Mr Speaker. Those opposite, Mr Speaker, see the COVID pandemic as some sort of opportunity to lock in endless income support. And that is not a responsible thing, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. The member for Reid.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Will the minister update the House on how the Morrison government is supporting Australians by continuing to guarantee the provision of essential health services and medicines through the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Health, the member for Macarthur. Sure, if you're on the list, but I just remind, I've just appointed you to the Speaker's panel. Member for Macarthur, I'm addressing you. Just appointed you to the Speaker's panel. That means you're not allowed to interject at all. Full stop, ever again. It's one of the reasons I appointed you. Minister for Health has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Reid, who comes to this place with a great history of advocacy and practice in mental health. And over the course of the pandemic, we've continued to invest in mental health, not just for the pandemic, but as part of a 2/3 increase in funding for mental health over the life of this government. New funding for aged care support in mental health, new funding for Headspace, new funding for eating disorder clinics, new funding for adult mental health clinics around the country. But on top of that, we've also struck with our pharmacists a new 5-year agreement in the middle of the pandemic, an extra $1.5 billion, which will help with the guarantee of 200 million PBS scripts a year. In addition to that, we've also been able to strike a $131.4 billion once-in-5-year hospital agreement, which has at its heart the funding of increased services with an extra $31.4 billion for our hospitals, but also the innovative role of hospital in the home, especially with regards to mental health and orthopaedic recovery. All of these things have occurred whilst we've been battling and managing the COVID outbreak. And we know that in a global pandemic, now at almost 26 million people, now that has seen 8 out of 8 states and territories initially succeed and flatten that curve and beat that virus, and now 7 out of 8, but with one state still challenged with lockdowns, with curfews, with 5-kilometre movement limits. But we are making progress. And throughout that time, we closed the borders on the 1st of February to help protect and save Australians. We took action which was early. We put in place a testing regime which has been recognised as one of the broadest and most accurate in the world by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. We have put in place a tracing regime which around the country has been successful, and we've pumped support into Victoria through the ADF to assist them in Victoria bring their standards up to the rest of the country, and that's been an immensely important part of helping to recover from the Victorian crisis. And in addition to that, the work that we're doing has seen us invest in over 28.2 million telehealth consultations, a system created to protect Australians, a system which has then been built upon with $1.5 billion going in to support Australians in aged care. And what we've done with our hospitals is a public hospitals agreement and a private hospitals agreement specifically for COVID, as well as surge workforce. All of these things have put Australia in one of the strongest places in the world. And I want to thank our health workers, honour our health workers, and we will continue to fight to protect the health of Australians.
The Minister's time has concluded, and I now call the member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Lisa is a part-time tutor with 2 kids. What is the Prime Minister's response to Lisa, who says, "We don't have any savings and my partner is unwell and unable to seek work to assist with bills. I am so afraid of what will happen to my family if the proposed change to JobKeeper rate goes through."
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The income supports that the government is providing continues out, Mr Speaker, for JobKeeper till the end of March, and the JobSeeker arrangements continue to the end of December. And as I indicated when I announced these matters with the Treasurer, that it is most likely, Mr Speaker, that we will seek to extend those further, but we will of course consider how we do that closer to that time, because what is very important in the COVID-19 pandemic is that you make decisions based on the best possible information that you have at that time. For JobKeeper, it is important to provide a longer lead time on where those payments are going, so businesses and others can be aware of those changes and enable their arrangements to support those changes as they come into effect. For those, Mr Speaker, who have been on JobKeeper, there will be firms that, thankfully, will no longer need JobKeeper after the end of September. They will no longer be down that 30% on turnover, and their businesses will be going forward. And as a result of that 6-month support at that record level, that will mean that those who have been on JobKeeper, many of whom on reduced to 0 hours in fact, it is our hope that those businesses that have no longer in any need of JobKeeper, people will be able to go forward with even further hours. But for those whose incomes are reduced, Mr Speaker, that's what JobSeeker is there for. JobSeeker will continue to be there, Mr Speaker, to support their incomes, as those types of benefits have always been designed to do. And it is at a higher level, and it also has an income earning threshold of $300, which was effectively almost tripled, Mr Speaker, an income area which enables people to earn up to $300 as well as receiving then can go and qualify for JobSeeker payments on top of that. Now, Mr Speaker, that is why JobKeeper and JobSeeker work together. That is why we are continuing to extend JobKeeper and JobSeeker to provide that support through this coronavirus period. Now, it is true that 7 out of 8 states and territories have had great success, Mr Speaker, in suppressing the virus, and that is enabling their economies to move forward again. I was talking to Premier McGowan this morning, And he was telling me of what was occurring in Western Australia, and I welcome that, Mr Speaker. I welcome that, because whether it's Western Australian businesses or New South Wales businesses, Mr Speaker, or any of the other states and territories, we did actually, and how that's going, Mr Speaker, I welcome that. But for those areas like Victoria, which are doing it much tougher, they will obviously have a greater share of the JobKeeper and JobSeeker support, because that is how the program is designed. We will transition those programs, Mr Speaker, because that's the responsible thing to do, but we will ensure that those programs of support remain there for those like the person you've indicated will continue to need them.
Has concluded, and I call the member for Higgins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Will the Minister please update the House on how the Morrison government is continuing to guarantee education funding through the COVID pandemic?
The Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Higgins for her question, and can I thank her for her passion for education. And for those who didn't hear the member for Higgins' speech in this chamber yesterday, she spoke about Grace Halifax, a young grade 3 student who, because of what's going in Victoria, has been doing ABC coding lessons for other students, and over 200 students have come onto those Zoom lessons to take place in those ABC for coding. Inspirational story, and well done for the member for Higgins for her support for Grace. Can I just say that guaranteeing the essential services is a hallmark of the Morrison government, especially when it comes to education. When you look at what we've done for childcare, $8.9 billion in 2021, growing to nearly $10 billion in 2022-23.
The member for Perth.
3.2% reduction in out-of-pocket expenses as part of our package. 72% of parents pay no more than $5 per day in daycare centres, and 24% pay no more than $2 per hour. And our COVID-19 measures have meant that 99% of childcare services remain open right across the nation. And once again, I thank those early childhood educators for the role they've played throughout this pandemic. We've also guaranteed preschool funding again, $450 million in 2020, growing to $453 million in 2021. And that brings total preschool spending by the coalition government to $3.2 billion. There's also record funding for schools, $21.79 billion in 2020. That's part of a record $314.2 billion investment in schools over 2018 to 2029, an increase of 63.2% per student. And our spending is growing fastest for state schools at around 6.4% per student each year from 2018 to 2023, compared to 5% per student growth for the non-government sector. And thanks to our support and working cooperatively with states and territories, every state and territory bar Victoria has face-to-face teaching occurring in the classroom. And our hope is that with Victoria, when it comes to Term 4, that we'll once again see that face-to-face teaching occurring again, because we all know how important that is for the children, especially those from low SES backgrounds, those children with a disability and those from rural and remote areas. We are guaranteeing the essential services when it comes to the education under the stewardship and the leadership of the Prime Minister.
I call the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Pauline is a part-time retail worker and a mum to 3 kids. Pauline says about JobKeeper, the $1,500 is enough for me to survive on just, including rent and food. Why is the Prime Minister making it harder for Pauline to pay her rent and feed her kids by cutting JobKeeper in the middle of the worst recession in almost a century?
The Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And the reason we have extended JobKeeper The reason we have extended JobSeeker is to ensure that because the coronavirus pandemic, particularly in Victoria, is extending, whereas many other states and territories, businesses are reopening again, and we want to see more of that, Mr Speaker, that they are being able to get back on their feet again, those businesses, and being able to restore the hours that have been lost in so many of those other states and territories. But I do remember being in this place earlier this year, Mr Speaker, and those opposite were actually attacking us. The Labor Party was saying we were paying part-time workers too much under JobKeeper. They were saying that by paying them $1,500, Mr Speaker, that this was wrong and we should be paying them less. Now, Mr Speaker, this is what I'm becoming confused of by the Labor Party. The leader before was interjecting on me and he said I had contradicted. And he's right, Mr Speaker, because he's just said it again. He said I had contradicted myself. No, I was just outlining, Mr Speaker, the completely competing positions that the Leader of the Labor Party has had when it comes to JobKeeper and JobSeeker. He says it needs to transition, and then he says it needs to keep going on, Mr Speaker. The each-way bet that the Leader of the Opposition has on this issue means he is a double-minded man, Mr Speaker. He is not someone you can rely on because he can't, Mr Speaker, hold a consistent position from one end of the day
Member
to the
for
other.
Shortland.
This is not someone, Mr Speaker, that Australians can rely on. This is not someone, Mr Speaker, that people can trust. And you know, Mr Speaker, Australians have worked this out about the Leader of the Opposition. They know he'll say whatever he has to, Mr Speaker, to keep himself where he is.
And I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for National Disability Insurance Scheme and the Minister for Government Services. Can the Minister update the House on how the Morrison government is guaranteeing essential services for the disability sector during the COVID-19 recession?
The Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and Government Services.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for McKellar for his question and for his advocacy for those with disability in his seat, 1,646 participants that I know he is passionate in caring for. Despite all of the issues we're going through in COVID-19, the Morrison government continues to deliver for NDIS participants, acting to ensure that the essential services that people require continue during a very challenging time. Despite the conditions we're in, the latest quarterly report shows that the NDIA has now driven significant improvements to ensure participants are receiving timely supports. There are now a staggering 400,000 Australians in the scheme. And despite the circumstances of the last few months, 28,000 people entered the scheme in the last quarter alone, and that's something we as a nation should be proud of. More than 175,000 Australians are receiving supports for the very first time. The first time in their life they're receiving some sort of support from the state. And as more participants have joined the scheme, we've continued to improve the timeliness and the responsiveness. In June this year, an access decision took 10 days, 4 times faster than 12 months ago, and only 6 days for access if you're a child from 0 to 6, 7 times faster than 12 months ago. The average number of days to receive a first plan is 67 days, a 50% improvement from 12 months ago, and for children even quicker, 42 days. And again, despite COVID-19, $5 billion was paid to deliver support to NDIS participants in the June quarter. $5 billion over a tumultuous 3 months in our nation's life to ensure the services are there for needy Australians, a staggering 86% increase on the same time last year. We are absolutely committed as a government to providing support to Australians, hence the announcement of landmark reforms last week. We've supported in principle all of the Tune recommendations, and that includes our commitment we made at the election for a participant service guarantee to legislate timeframes within the NDIA for decisions on access, undertake planning and complete planning reviews. KPIs, if you like, to ensure accountability for Australians seeking support. Over the next 6 months, in line with public health advice, we'll continue to work in close collaboration with Australians with disability and the sector to implement these reforms. Mr Speaker, this is a world-leading reform. It is a national endeavour, and as we move towards 500,000 participants in the scheme, can I thank everyone who's been involved in delivering what is such essential, necessary supports to such wonderful Australians who need it every day.
I'm now going to call the member for Maribyrnong.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How many Australians with a disability have been infected with COVID-19?
The Minister for Government Services.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As I put out a press release last week, the government's committed to providing updates on numbers every day in terms of Australians with disability who have been impacted by COVID-19. I can report to the House that cumulative since March 2020, 102 participants have tested positive to COVID-19, and currently there are 23 active cases. Numbers will continue to be put out every day to ensure all Australians are up to date.
The Minister might just pause. I think the member for Maribyrnong is seeking to raise a point of order. If broadcasting can just...
How many NDIS participants? I asked how many Australians with a disability had been infected. The NDIS participants are a cohort or a smaller group, but the people with a disability, including in aged care, is a larger number, logically.
The member for Maribyrnong's raised his point of order on relevance. The Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. If I can just inform the House, there's a survey of disability and aged care comes out by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It reports that 4.4 million Australians have some disability of some sort. As I've just explained to the House, those with permanent and significant disability are in the NDIS, and the numbers I've just given, which are reported daily to ensure accountability. In terms of numbers of people with a disability as a whole, it would require the states and territories to know who every single Australian is who have replied to that survey to say they have a disability. It would require those Australians to self-report in some way to the states and territories, and then for those states and territories to report in that. And if the member is suggesting that that onus of responsibility should be put upon the states and territories, then I would suggest that member speak to the states and territories and ask them to do that. The Commonwealth's responsibility is to the NDIS, a responsibility we take seriously, which is why I can report with great accuracy the daily numbers, why I can report exactly where we're up to, while we can report upon everything. But in terms of all
member for Maribyrnong
Australians
has had his
with
point
any
of order.
disability, that is a question quite rightly for states and territories who have the responsibility within all agreements to care for Australians with a disability who are not in the NDIS.
And I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on the Morrison government's commitment to keeping Australians safe during the COVID-19 pandemic and recession, and, so importantly, the steps being taken to protect our Aussie kids?
The Minister for Home Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question, and I want all Australian families to know that the Morrison government is doing whatever we can to provide support to you. As the Health Minister pointed out earlier, the government took decisions very early on to close our borders to make sure that we could protect Australians and to keep COVID from our country for as long as possible. But we've also made, Mr Speaker, a number of other decisions to help Australian families stay safe during the course of this global pandemic. We have taken a decision to invest a significant amount of money into the Australian Federal Police and into other agencies within the Home Affairs portfolio to identify individuals who are preying on children and families whilst they're spending more time online. And I've reported to the House before, but I can provide an update that there has been additional warrant activity by the Australian Federal Police and the Queensland Police and other agencies in recent days. But there is a case that I can provide some detail on, and that is in relation to a 43-year-old Gold Coast man who was arrested by the Brisbane Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Team, and that individual had seized from him 4 mobile phones. It's alleged that that individual was involved in sharing child abuse material, images of young boys and girls, through both Snapchat and MeWe. And the fact is, Mr Speaker, that these predators will work online. They will provide images, they'll share images to other pedophiles. They'll seek to groom young children, boys and girls, pretending that they are of a similar age. They understand the language and the nuance of what's required to have a conversation with children of a very young age, and ultimately, in some cases, tragically, as we've seen, they can lure those children into a physical meet. And so the work of the agencies, in particular the ACE in Brisbane, but the AFP and the QPS in relation to this investigation, really needs to be noted by the House, and it underscores the fact that we will do whatever it takes to make sure, as a government, we are investing in our law enforcement and intelligence agencies to keep Australians safe. We want to make sure that families hear very clearly the message that you need to have a full and frank conversation with your children about making sure that the appropriate protections are in place when they're online, and if they are fearful that their children have been put in a compromised position, then we want them please to contact Crime Stoppers or to contact the police, because the ACE has a specialist expertise in working with NGOs and others that can provide support, and this is a #1 priority of the Prime Minister and I know all of us in this chamber and all decent people across the Australian society.
The Leader of the Opposition on indulgence.
Brief indulgence, Mr Speaker. Indeed, the Minister got that absolutely right, that this Parliament's absolutely united in doing whatever we can to stamp out that abhorrent practice, and it is a good use of this Parliament that the Minister just used to inform parents about the dangers and the importance of making sure that their children are aware of what they need to do should there be one of these predators, these evil predators, engage with them in some form online.
And I now call the member for Eden Monaro.
My question is to the Prime Minister. My community has been hit hard by drought, by bushfire, by floods and now COVID. Why did the Prime Minister fail to spend a single cent from an annual $200 million Recovery and Mitigation Fund last financial year for my bushfire-affected community?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. I commend her on her first speech in this place and her first question here in this place, and of course on her election to this Parliament. Mr Speaker, what I can confirm to the member is that the support provided in the Eden Monaro electorate across the various programs that the government has run to support people through this bushfire crisis in Bega Valley and Eurobodalla and Queanbeyan Palerang, Snowy Monaro and Snowy Valleys, Mr Speaker. Whether it's on the primary producer grants, there have been commitments of over $9 million to the Bega Valley area, over $5 million to Eurobodalla, in the Queanbeyan Palerang area over $2.3 million, and Snowy Monaro $2.8 million, and Snowy Valley some $17 million. Importantly, the small business recovery grants, which the member will be very familiar with. Those small business recovery grants, there were 236 recipients approved for that program in Bega Valley, and that's some $6.2 million of support. In Eurobodalla, some $8.6 million of support. In Queanbeyan Palerang, $604,000. Snowy Monaro, $739,000.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Yeah. On direct relevance, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister acknowledged at the start of the answer of it being the first question from the member, it asks about a specific fund, and the Prime Minister is yet to refer to that fund.
So, well, the Prime Minister's obviously giving some context, but I do take the point of order. But I think he's been entitled to say what he said up until now, and then needs to either bring himself to the substance of the question or start to wind up. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and the Minister will add further to my answer. But whether it's on the concessional loans, the disaster recovery payment, Mr Speaker, the disaster recovery allowance, right across Australia, but particularly in the member's electorate, the government has been swift to provide this support, and I'll ask the Minister to add further to my answer.
And I'll just say, just before I call the Minister, I mean, the reason, just for clarity, why I allowed that for more than a minute was because of the preamble that was very broad, that mentioned drought, floods, bushfires and COVID. The Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and her leadership of her community as the local mayor. The ERF fund is a $200 million dividend that will be paid each year when required, and there's two tranches of that. Well, there's two tranches of it. There's $150 million for extraordinary recovery payments. That will not be used because we have put over $2 billion in terms of recovery. And the advice that I got from the Director-General of Emergency Management Australia was that the programs that we put in response to the fires, that $2 billion plus, there is no need to spend that $150. The $50 million, there's $50 million set aside for preparedness, and Emergency Management Australia will be going out to the community in the coming weeks in asking the community around preparedness, making sure that we build back better. Your community and those communities that are affected right around the country will have the opportunity to invest and take advantage of that $50 million. We will continue to use every means possible in working with those communities and state governments to be able to partner with us. And that's why it's been an approach from not Canberra-led but locally-led, and we are working with state governments to make sure that $200 million will again be available next financial year if it is required. It will continue to be used, and we will continue to make sure that the $2 billion, of which we have got $1.7 billion out, which we thought we'd only get $500 million out by the 30th of June, is well ahead of budget. There is results that are being seen on the ground today.
And I call the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. Will the Attorney please update the House on the Morrison government's continued commitment during the COVID-19 pandemic and recession to ensuring Australia's national security, including through preventing terrorist attacks?
The Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And as the member is aware, our government's first and foremost priority is keeping Australians safe, and as the Minister for Home Affairs noted, even during this period where naturally enough the attention is focused on public health, the terrible events such as online exploitation go on unabated, and the threat of terrorism in Australia during this very difficult COVID-19 period sadly remains very real and very much with us. The terrorist threat was elevated to probable in 2014, and it remains at that level to this day. That is why, as a government, since 2013 we've passed 19 tranches of national security legislation, laws that are keeping Australians safe. And indeed, our excellent security agencies have been overwhelmingly successful, with 18 major counter-terrorism disruptions and 110 people being charged. What we now face is a somewhat new and additional and significant challenge, because we now see a large cohort of convicted terrorist offenders that were subject to the operations in full swing post 9/11 and post the Bali bombings, now due to be released following the expiry of their sentences. Already this year we've seen 9 terrorist offenders have been released, and there are another 12 convicted terrorist offenders who are due for release over the next 5 years. Regretfully, notwithstanding best efforts, many of those individuals continue to hold on to extremist ideology, and they pose a very significant risk to the Australian community. You need only look at the horrific 2019 London Bridge attacks to see that when individuals of this type are released into the community, they can pose a very great threat. So as a government, we have been very methodically building a framework to manage the threat that's posed by these types of convicted terrorist offenders. In 2016, we introduced the high-risk terrorist offender regime, which ensures continuing detention. In 2019, we passed laws that will keep terrorists in prison for longer by ensuring that there's a presumption against parole or bail for all offenders who pose a threat. And today we introduced the Counter-Terrorism Legislation Amendment High-Risk Terrorist Offenders Bill, and that is the latest and very important step in building this framework of protection. The legislation introduced this morning, Mr Speaker, means that high-risk convicted terrorists will face even tighter controls when eventually released from prison under what is now going to be a new intensive supervision regime. What will be known as extended supervision orders will be in this regime. They will ensure that terrorist offenders are subject to unfettered close supervision for years after their release. The regime provides for the broadest possible range of controls to be applied to these offenders, such as requiring schedules of movements, participation in rehabilitation or intervention programs, and compliance with directions given by police.
and they will allow police officers to search premises. And I'll finally note for the House that, very importantly, there are transitional measures that mean that 6 offenders already in the community would be eligible to move on to this scheme.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is addressed to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's failure on aged care is costing lives. His failure on the economy is costing jobs. When will the Prime Minister take responsibility for the consequences of his actions?
The Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, once again, I take every responsibility for my tasks and what is I swore an oath to uphold every single day I walk into this building, into my office, or walk in any part of this great country, Mr Speaker. That's what I do every single day. And I know there are the responsibilities that we have, which is why we have acted, whether it's on JobKeeper, on JobSeeker, on the work we've done on skills, Mr Speaker, on the support we've put into our health system to protect Australians from this virus, to work together with other parts of this country, particularly other governments, states and territories, and I'll continue to do that, Mr Speaker. But I won't say to the Australian people that our country is immune from the global pandemic, and I won't say, Mr Speaker, that we are immune from the global pandemic recession. This is having a terrible impact on this country, and each and every day we will work to ensure that we mitigate that impact as much as we possibly can. And whether it's on the health side or whether it's on the economic side, Mr Speaker, it would be unfair of the Leader of the Opposition not to acknowledge that Australia fares better than almost every other developed country in the world on these measures and the impact of this virus in Australia. Now, it may not be convenient for the Leader of the Opposition to point to that fact, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, he might be unaware of the global pandemic, Mr Speaker, that has hit this country and has hit every other country. And there's a reason for that, Mr Speaker. If I go back to February of this year, and on the 27th of February this year, Mr Speaker, I stood up in the Prime Minister's courtyard and I made this announcement. I said, based on the expert medical advice we've received, there is every indication, this is on the 27th of February, there is every indication that the world will soon enter into a pandemic phase of the coronavirus. And as a result, Mr Speaker, I said we have agreed today, the 27th of February, and initiated the implementation of the Coronavirus Emergency Response Plan. And I said, while the World Health Organisation is yet to declare the nature of the coronavirus and its move towards a pandemic phase, Mr Speaker, we believe that the risk of a global pandemic is very much upon us. Mr Speaker, in this chamber, at almost that exact time, the Leader of the Opposition accused me of standing up to make such a statement to try and distract from the issues of the day. That's what the Leader of the Opposition— he didn't understand the pandemic then. He doesn't understand it now, Mr Speaker. He got up at the press conference the other day, gave us a plan for February in August, Mr Speaker. This Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker, he got up at the press club the other day, talked about what his plan was for the government to do in February, and he announced it in August. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm not going to go into a time tunnel to find out what we should be doing today. He'll probably tell me next March, Mr Speaker. This Leader of the Opposition does not grasp this crisis. That's why he can't be trusted.
I call the member for Stirling.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. And will the minister outline to the House how, despite the COVID-19 recession, the Morrison government is continuing to deliver on its commitment to bolster our national defence capabilities?
And I call the Minister for Defence Industry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Always a pleasure to get a question from the member for Stirling, and I would like to acknowledge his service to our nation and also thank him for his passion and interest in the defence industries. Mr Speaker, the Morrison government is investing a record $270 billion in our defence capability, and despite the issues we've all experienced across our nation with COVID-19, our plan to invest in defence is guaranteeing our defence capabilities for now and into the future. And that's what our investment of $270 billion is all about, Mr Speaker. It's clear that our government's JobKeeper plan has helped to keep the wheels of defence industry moving, and that has been welcomed. Our investment is backing the local tradies, the local companies, especially in regional Australia. Again, this is very welcomed. And in Victoria, Mr Speaker, JobKeeper has been important to support those construction contractors who are working on defence contracts. But don't take my word for it, Mr Speaker. This is what National CEO of Master Builders Australia, Danita Warren, has said recently. JobKeeper is critical for the building and construction sector and continues to be a lifeline for defence construction contractors and subcontractors in Victoria, as their operations are severely hampered by the crushing Stage 4 lockdown. Mr Speaker, last week the Prime Minister and I announced a $1 billion defence package for our defence industry, and included in that $1 billion was a $300 million package to support those bases around the country, more work for estate and infrastructure, predominantly in regional areas, but in particular a focus on those bushfire-affected regions. Mr Speaker, we've done everything we can to get the cash out the door quickly. Defence industry knows that this government has its back. We've paid some 200,000 invoices since March, almost $14 billion in invoices, and of that, nearly $11 billion of invoice value has been paid early.
Members of my right.
Defence industry know that we have their back, and together we are making a significant difference. Mr Speaker,
Member for
with
Burst.
the time remaining, what I would like to do is to thank Australia's defence industry. We've had a number of challenges over the period with COVID-19. We've done everything we can to support them. Together with the government, together with Defence, we have overcome many, many challenges to ensure that we continue to develop our nation's defence capability.
The member for Rankin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Australia is in the worst recession in almost a century, and this week the Prime Minister cut JobKeeper, cut JobSeeker and cut wages. This hurts families, households, businesses and workers. There are millions of them. Isn't this the worst possible time to cut the support that Australians need? Won't it make the Morrison recession longer and deeper?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't know why the member for Rankin is smiling at a time of a COVID-19-induced recession.
No, the member for Rankin will resume his seat. As difficult as it may seem for him, he can only raise a point of order on relevance. He can't have a tit-tat argument, okay, about... Treasurer has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, he has a glass jaw, and now the fact was, Mr Speaker, that he was smiling. Now,
Members
Mr Speaker, $42.5 billion has already gone out to JobKeeper, through JobKeeper to Australian workers, Mr Speaker. More than 3.5 million Australian workers and around 1 million Australian businesses are benefiting from JobKeeper. And the honourable member knows that JobKeeper is a remarkable program. And if he's not going to take my word for it, they are the words of the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr Speaker. A remarkable program that is helping to save jobs. And as I've said to this House, as Treasury have estimated, some 700,000 Australian jobs have been saved by JobKeeper, Mr Speaker. And that without JobKeeper, the unemployment rate would be 5 percentage points higher than it is today. Now, Mr Speaker, the member for Rankin should listen to his own previous words, where he said, in response to JobKeeper, that should be looking at a kind of tapering. He said that on ABC The Business, Mr Speaker. Then the member for Grainler said on the Today Show that we will need a tapering off. And he was asked, what does this mean? And he said it will go down over time. The member for Grainler said on ABC News Breakfast about JobKeeper that we need to shift away. These mechanisms won't be in place forever. The member for Grainler then went on John Law's radio and said of JobKeeper, we need some sort of a transition. The member for Grainler, the Leader of the Opposition, then had a doorstop, Mr Speaker, and said in relation to JobKeeper, we need a transition, Mr Speaker.
The Treasurer can resume his seat. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
I'm pretty sure that I wasn't the focus of the question, Mr Speaker. It was about the government.
Yes. The reason I'm giving a little bit more latitude, and this is something that member for Rankin, the Treasurer, you've just You're about to. I can tell. Just going to say, what makes it more difficult is when the first 15 seconds of, I won't even say of the question, because it wasn't a question, the first 15 seconds was a series of declarations and statements before the question came. I think the point the Leader of the Opposition is making, I want him to understand how long preambles lead to a broader answer in the question, and it's certainly something I'll discuss with the House when we return after Budget Week, I can say. But it enables the Treasurer to compare and contrast to an extent, but he's just about done that, I think. And he needs
the point Treasurer. I was simply making, and this was the subject of the question, that the Leader of the Opposition and the member for Rankin have repeatedly called for a transition in the JobKeeper payment, and that is exactly what is occurring, with an extension and expansion of this record spending program, Mr Speaker, at $101 billion. Now, Mr Speaker, JobKeeper has provided remarkable stories right around this country. It's helped keep people in work and helped keep businesses in business, and it's a key part of our JobMaker plan, and it's a key part of our economic recovery.
The member for Curtin.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister inform the House how the Morrison government's plans in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and recession are working to suppress the virus, reopen our economy and deliver Australia's economic recovery?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. As this parliament rises today, Mr Speaker, the challenges being faced by Australians each and every day all around this country, wherever you live, those challenges will continue. And, Mr Speaker, the resolve of our government is to continue to stand by those Australians each and every single day and continue to put in place the measures that have been necessary, that we have planned for and we are rolling out, Mr Speaker, from that day back in February and even before that, as we knew we were entering into this global pandemic. Mr Speaker, the response that we've had working with state and territory governments has been first to seek to suppress the virus. And in 7 out of 8 states and territories in this country, Australia has come together to be able to achieve that, Mr Speaker, and we need to continue to do that. And in Victoria, Victoria is turning the corner, Mr Speaker, and we welcome that. And this weekend we hope to hear more, Mr Speaker, how about Victoria will be able to go forward. And I know Victorians will be looking forward to that, and I will continue to work with the Premier to that end, Mr Speaker. We will continue to suppress the virus. We continue to build the capability to live with that virus, with the testing and the tracing, Mr Speaker, capabilities and the other measures that are needed for us to live with that virus. But we will also continue to provide the support that Australians need to get through this most difficult of times, the income support that is necessary, the support to the businesses who've seen their doors closed or have had their doors closed on them, Mr Speaker, as a result of the actions the governments have had to take. And it's very important for those businesses and all of their employees that we commit to ensure that we can get their doors open and we can get their Australians back in their jobs, Mr Speaker. Australia was not meant to be closed. Australia was meant to be open, Mr Speaker. Australians want to see Australia become open as the founding members, Mr Speaker, of this place ensure it was from the outset, and Australia must become whole again, Mr Speaker. This is the way. That's what success looks like. And, Mr Speaker, as we gather again tomorrow, and I thank all the premiers and all the chief ministers for the work that they have done to become job makers with this government. Job makers, whether it's investing in infrastructure, job makers investing in skills and training, Mr Speaker, job makers by working together to get our economy open again. Mr Speaker, we need to come together. We need to ensure that we are clear with Australians that we will seek to make Australia a whole again by Christmas this year, that Australians can come together in the way they always would at Christmas, to ensure that they can go and see their families and return home and spend that important time. 2021 is going to be a better year than 2020, Mr Speaker, and it's going to be a year in which we need to ensure we work together to make Australia that one great nation again that we were made to be. And on that point, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.